Welcome back. I am Pemberton, and this is part 23 of Herodotus' Histories. We turn now to the other end of the Persian world, to Libya, and to a long, strange story of how Greeks came to live there. It begins with the Minyae, descendants of the Argonauts, hounded out of Lemnos and Sparta, and the founding of the island of Thera. From Thera, on the urging of a stubborn oracle, a stammering man named Battus sails to Africa and founds Cyrene. And then we follow the kings of his line the Bactriads through prosperity and reform and murder, down to the exile Arcesilaus and his fierce mother Pheretime, whose appeal to Persian Egypt will bring an army down on her enemies. Let us go on.
Macmillan was doing these things, and at this very same time a great expedition was also being made against Libya, on an occasion that I shall relate after first telling what follows. The children's children of those who sailed in the Argo had been driven out by the Pelasgians who carried away the women of the Athenians at Broron. Driven from Lemnos by these men, they departed and sailed to Lacedaemon. There they sat down on Mount Taygetus and kindled a fire. When the Lacedaemonians saw this, they sent a messenger to ask who they were and where they came from. They answered the messenger by saying that they were many children of the heroes who sailed in the Argo, for those heroes, they said, had put in at Lemnos and begotten the race from which they sprang. After hearing the story of the descent of the Minyae, the Lacedaemonians sent a second time and asked why they had come into the country and were causing a fire to blaze. They said that they had been cast out by the Pelasgians, and had now come to the land of their fathers, for it was most just that this should be done. They asked to be allowed to live with them, having a share of civic rights and receiving an allotted portion of the land. The Lacedaemonians were content to receive the Minyae on the terms they themselves desired, moved above all by the fact that the sons of Tyndarus had sailed in the Argo. So they received the Minyae, gave them a share of land, and distributed them among the tribes. The Minyae immediately made marriages, and gave in marriage to others the women they had brought with them from Lemnos. Before much time had passed, however, the Minyae broke out into insolence. They demanded a share of the royal power and did other impious things besides. Therefore the Lacedaemonians resolved to put them to death, seize them, and cast them into prison. The Lacedaemonians put to death by night all those whom they put to death, and no man by day. When they were just about to kill the Minyae, the wives of the Minyae, who were native Spartans and daughters of the first citizens of Sparta, begged to be allowed to enter the prison and speak each with her own husband. The Lacedaemonians let them go in, not supposing that any trick would be practiced by them. But when the women entered, they gave their husbands all the garments they were wearing, and themselves received their husbands' clothes. Thus the Minyae put on the women's clothing and went out of the prison as women, and having escaped in this way, they went again to Taygetus and sat down there. At this same time Thera, son of Atesian, son of Tisamenos, son of Thersander, son of Polynax, was preparing to set out from Lacedaemon to found a settlement. This Thera, who was of the race of Cadmos, was the mother's brother of the sons of Aristodemos, Eurysthenes and Procles. While these sons were still children, Thera held the royal power in Sparta as their guardian. But when his nephews had grown up and taken the power into their own hands, Thera was grieved that, after he had tasted rule himself, he should be ruled by others. He said that he would not remain in Lacedaemon, but would sail away to his kinsmen. In the island now called Thera, but formerly called Callista, there were descendants of Memblairos, son of Poikiles, a Phoenician. Cadmos, son of Agenor, in his search for Europa, had put into land at the island now called Thera, and whether the country pleased him when he landed, or whether he chose to do so for some other reason, he left in this island, besides other Phoenicians, Memblairos also, one of his own kinsmen. These men occupied the island called Callus, for 8 generations before Thera came from Lacedaemon. To these people, then, Thera was preparing to go, taking with him people from the tribes and intending to settle together with those already mentioned, not with any design to drive them out, but on the contrary claiming them very strongly as kin. When the Minyae escaped from prison and sat down on Taygetus, Thera pleaded with the Lacedaemonians, who were intending to put them to death, that no slaughter should take place, and at the same time he undertook to lead them out of the land. The Lacedaemonians agreed to this proposal. Thera sailed away with 330 oared galleys to the descendants of Memblairos, though he by no means took all the Minyae with him, but only a few. The greater number turned toward the land of the Pheretime Caucons. After driving these people out of their country, they divided themselves into 6 groups and founded the following towns in their territory: Leprion, Makistos, Phryxe, Pygos, Epion, and Nudian. The Eleans sacked the greater number of these within my own lifetime. Meanwhile, the island received the name Thera after Thera, who led the settlement. Since Thera's son said that he would not sail with him, Thera said that he would leave him behind as a sheep among wolves. In accordance with that saying, the young man received the name Oialikos, and it happened that this name prevailed over his former name. From Oialikos was born Aegeus, after whom the Aegidai are named, a powerful clan in Sparta. Since the children of the men of this tribe did not live to grow up, they established, at the suggestion of an oracle, a temple to the avenging deities of Laos and Oedipus. After this, the same practice was continued in Thera by the descendants of these men. Up to this point of the story, the Lacedaemonians agree in their report with the men of Thera. But in what follows, only the Theraeans report that it happened as follows. Grinos, son of Isanios, a descendant of the Theras already mentioned and king of the island of Thera, came to Delphi, bringing from his state the offering of a hecatomb. Accompanying him, besides others of the citizens, was Battus, son of Polymnestos, who was by descent of the family of Euphemos, of the race of the Minyae. When Grinos, king of the Therans, was consulting the oracle about other matters, the Pythian prophetess answered by bidding him found a city in Libya. He replied, "Lord, I am by this time somewhat old and heavy to move, but bid one of these younger men do this." As he said this, he pointed toward Battus. So far things went at that time. But after they had gone away, they were at a loss about the saying of the oracle, because they had no knowledge of Libya, nor where on earth it was, and did not dare to send a colony to the unknown. After this, for 7 years there was no rain in Thera, and during these years all the trees on their island withered except one. When the Therians consulted the oracle, the Pythian prophetess declared that the matter of colonizing Libya was the cause. Since they had no remedy for their evil, they sent messengers to Crete to find out whether any of the Cretans, or any strangers living in Crete, had ever come to Libya. As these messengers wandered around the country, they came also to the city of Atanos. There they met a purple fisher named Charobios, who said that he had been carried away by winds and had come to Libya, and in Libya to the island of Plagia. They persuaded this man by payment of money and took him to Thera. From Thera, men set sail to explore, not many in number at first. Charobios guided them to the same island of Plagia. They left Charobios there, leaving with him provisions for a certain number of months, and themselves sailed as quickly as possible to report about the island to the men of Thera. Since they stayed away longer than the appointed time, Charobios found himself destitute. After this, a ship of Samos, whose master was Koleos, while sailing to Egypt, was carried out of its course and came to this island of Plagia. The Samians heard the whole story from Charobios and left him provisions for a year. Then they themselves put out to sea from the island and sailed on, trying to reach Egypt, but they were continually carried away by the east wind. Since the wind did not stop blowing, they passed through the pillars of Heracles and came to Tartessos, guided by divine providence. At that time this trading place was untouched by any, so that when they returned home they made a greater profit from their cargo than any other Hellenes of whom we have certain knowledge, except at least Stratos, son of Laodamas the Aeginetan, for with him no other man can contend. The Samians set apart 6 talents, the 10th part of their gains, and had a bronze vessel made like an argolic mixing bowl, with heads of griffins projecting in a row around it. They dedicated this in the temple of Hera, setting beneath it as supports 3 colossal bronze statues 7 cubits high, resting on their knees. Because of this deed, great friendship was first formed between the people of Cyrene and Thera and the Samians. Meanwhile the Theraans, when they arrived at Thera after leaving Charobios on the island, reported that they had colonized an island on the coast of Libya. The men of Thera resolved to send one of every 2 brothers, chosen by lot, and men besides taken from all the regions of the island, which are 7 in number. Furthermore, Battus was to be both their leader and their king. Thus they sent 2 fifth-oared galleys to Plagia. This is the report of the Theraans. For the rest of the account from this point onward, the Theraans agree with the men of Cyrene, yet concerning Battus, the Cyrenians tell a tale by no means the same as that of the Theraans. Their account is this. In Crete there is a city called Oxos, in which a man named Atirchos became king. He had a daughter whose mother was dead, named Pheretime, and he married another woman. After she came into the house, this woman thought fit to be a stepmother to Pheretime in deed as well as in name, treating her badly and devising every possible harm against her. At last she brought against her a charge of lewdness, and persuaded her husband that it was true. Convinced by his wife, Atirchos devised an unholy deed against his daughter. There was in Oxos a merchant of Thera named Themison, whom Atirchos took as his guest, friend, and made swear that he would certainly serve him in whatever he required. After making him swear this, he brought his daughter, and handed her over to him, ordering him to take her away, and throw her into the sea. Themison was greatly angered at the deceit practiced in the oath, and he dissolved the guest's friendship. He did as follows. He received the girl and sailed away, and when he reached the open sea, to free himself from blame in regard to the oath Atirchos had made him swear, he tied her on each side with ropes, lowered her into the sea, then drew her up again and came to Thera. After that, Polymnestos, a man of repute among the Theraans, received Pheretime from him and kept her as his concubine. In time, she bore him a son who had an impediment in his voice and lisped. To this son, as both Theraans and Cyrenians say, was given the name Battus. But I think some other name was given to him then, and that he was named Battus instead after he came to Libya, taking this surname from the oracle given to him at Delphi and from the rank he obtained, for the Libyans call a king Battus. For this reason, I think, the Pythian prophetess in her prophecy called him so, using the Libyan tongue, because she knew that he would be king in Libya. When he had grown to manhood, he came to Delphi to inquire about his voice. When he asked, the prophetess answered him in this way. For a voice you came, O Battus, but Lord Phobos Apollo sends you forth as settler to the sheep-rich Libyan land, just as if she had said in the Hellenic tongue, For a voice you came, O king. He answered, Lord, I came to you to inquire about my voice, but you answer me with other things that are impossible, bidding me go as a settler to Libya. With what power, or with what force of men, should I go? By saying this he did not persuade her at all to give him any other answer. As she was prophesying to him again the same things as before, Battus departed while she was still speaking and went away to Thera. After this, evil fortune came both to Battus himself and to the other men of Thera. The Therians, not understanding what had happened to them, sent to Delphi to inquire about the troubles they were suffering. The Pythian prophetess replied that if they joined with Battus in founding Cyrene in Libya, they would fare better. After this the Therians sent Battus with 2 50-oared galleys. These sailed to Libya, and then came back again to Thera, because they did not know what else to do. But the Therians pelted them with missiles when they tried to land, and would not allow them to come ashore, but ordered them to sail back again. So being forced, they sailed back and made a settlement on an island lying near the coast of Libya called, as has been said before, Plataea. This island is said to be the same size as the city of Cyrene that now exists. They continued to live on this island for 2 years. But since they had no prosperity, they left one of their number behind, and all the rest sailed away to Delphi. When they came to the oracle, they consulted it, saying that they were living in Libya, but that though they lived there, they fared no better. The Pythian prophetess answered them in this way: If you know the sheep-rich Libyan land better than I do, though you have not been there and I have, I wonder at your wisdom. Hearing this, Battus and his companions sailed back again. In fact, the god would not release them from the task of settlement until they had come to Libya itself. When they reached the island, and took up the man they had left, they made a settlement in Libya itself at a place opposite the island, called Xeris, which is enclosed on both sides by very beautiful woods, and a river flows beside it on one side. They lived in this place for 6 years. In the 7th year the Libyans persuaded them to leave it, asking them to do so and saying that they would lead them to a better region. So the Libyans led them away from that place, making them start toward evening. In order that the Hellenes might not see the fairest of all the regions as they passed through it, the Libyans calculated the time of daylight, and led them past it by night. This region is called Arasa. Then after bringing them to the so-called Spring of Apollo, the Libyans said, Hellenes, here is a suitable place for you to live, for here the heaven is pierced with holes. During the lifetime of the first settler Battus, who reigned 40 years, and of his son Arcesilaus, who reigned 16 years, the Cyrenians continued to live there with the same number of people as when they first set out for the colony. But in the time of the third king, called Battus the Prosperous, the Pythian prophetess gave an oracle in which she urged the Hellenes generally to sail and join the Cyrenians in colonizing Libya. The Cyrenians invited them, promising a division of land, and the oracle she uttered was this: Whoever comes afterward to the much desired land, to Libya, after the land has been divided, I say he shall one day repent it. Then great numbers gathered at Cyrene, and the Libyans living around had much land cut off from their possessions. Therefore they and their king, whose name was Atticron, since they had not only been deprived of their country, but had also been treated with great insolence by the Cyrenians, sent to Egypt and delivered themselves over to a prize king of Egypt. A prize gathered a great army of Egyptians and sent it against Cyrene. The men of Cyrene marched out to the region of Arasa and to the spring this day, and there they joined battle with the Egyptians and defeated them. Since the Egyptians had not previously tried the Hellenes in battle, and therefore despised them, they were slaughtered so badly that only a few returned to Egypt. Because of this, and because they blamed a prize for it, the Egyptians revolted from him. This Battus had a son called Arcesilaus. When Arcesilaus first became king, he quarreled with his own brothers until they finally departed to another region of Libya. Acting on their own, they founded the city that was then and is now called Barca. At the same time as they founded it, they induced the Libyans to revolt from the Cyrenians. After this, Arcesilaus made an expedition against those Libyans who had received his brothers, and who had also revolted from Cyrene. The Libyans, fearing him, departed and fled toward the eastern tribes of Libya. Arcesilaus followed them as they fled, until in his pursuit he arrived at Lucan in Libya. There the Libyans resolved to attack him. They joined battle and defeated the Cyrenians, so utterly that 7,000 hoplites of the Cyrenians fell there. After this disaster, Arcesilaus became sick, and after swallowing a potion he was strangled by his brother Heliarchos. Heliarchos was then treacherously killed by Arcesilaus' wife, whose name was Eryxo. Then Battus, the son of Arcesilaus, succeeded to the kingdom. He was lame and not sound in his feet. Because of the misfortune that had befallen them, the Cyrenians sent men to Delphi to ask what form of rule they should adopt in order to live in the best way possible. The Pythian prophetess told them to take to themselves a reformer of their state from Mantinea of the Arcadians. The men of Cyrene made the request, and the Mantineans gave them the most respected man among their citizens, whose name was Demonax. This man came to Cyrene, and after learning all things exactly, first caused them to have 3 tribes, distributing them in this way. One division he made of the Theraeans and their dependents, another of the Peloponnesians and Cretans, and a third of all the islanders. Secondly, for the king Battus he set apart domains of land and priesthoods, but all the other powers that the kings had formerly possessed he assigned as public rights to the people. During the reign of this Battus, matters continued in this way. But in the reign of his son Arcesilaus, there was much disturbance concerning the offices of the state. Arcesilaus, son of Battus the Lame and of Pheretime, said that he would not allow things to remain as the Mantinean Demonax had arranged them, but demanded to have back the royal rights of his forefathers. After stirring up strife, he was defeated and went into exile at Samos, while his mother went to Salamis in Cyprus. At that time the ruler of Salamis was Eulthan, the same man who dedicated as an offering the censer at Delphi, a work well worth seeing, which stands in the treasury of the Corinthians. Pheretime came to him and asked him for an army to restore herself and her son to Cyrene. Eulthan, however, was ready to give her anything rather than that. Whenever she received what he gave, she said that this too was a fine gift, but finer still would be the other gift of an army which she was asking for. Since she kept saying this about everything that was given, at last Eulthan sent her a present of a golden spindle and distaff with wool on it. When Pheretime again made the same remark about this gift, Eulthan said that such things as this were given as gifts to women, not an army. Meanwhile Arcesilaus, while in Samos, was gathering everyone together by promising a division of land. While a great host was being collected, Arcesilaus set out to Delphi to inquire of the oracle about his return from exile. The Pythian prophetess gave him this answer: for forenamed Battus and forenamed Arcesilaus, 8 generations of man, Loxias grants you to be kings of Cyrene, but beyond this he counsels you not even to attempt it. You, however, must keep quiet when you have come back to your land. If you find the furnace full of jars, do not heat the jars fiercely, but let them go with a fair wind. But if you heat the furnace fiercely, do not enter the place flowed around by water, for if you do, you shall die, both you and the bull fairer than all the rest. Thus the Pythian prophetess answered Arcesilaus. Arcesilaus took with him those gathered in Samos and returned to Cyrene. When he had gained possession of the power, he did not remember the oracle, but tried to exact penalties from the opposing faction, because they had driven him out. Some of them escaped from the country altogether, but Arcesilaus got others into his power and sent them away to Cyprus to be put to death. These were driven out of their course to Cnidos, and the men of Cnidos rescued them and sent them away to Thera. Some other Cyrenians fled to a great tower belonging to Aglamachos, a private citizen, and Arcesilaus burned them by piling brushwood around it. After he had done this deed, he understood that the oracle meant this, when the Pythian prophetess forbade him, if he found the jars in the furnace, to heat them fiercely. He voluntarily kept away from the city of the Cyrenians, fearing the death prophesied by the oracle and supposing that Cyrene was the place flowed around by water. He had for his wife a kinswoman of his own, the daughter of the king of Barca, whose name was Eleazar. To him Arcesilaus came. Men of Barca, together with certain exiles from Cyrene, saw him walking about in the marketplace and killed him, and also his father-in-law Eleazar. Thus Arcesilaus, whether willingly or unwillingly, missed the meaning of the oracle and fulfilled his own destiny. Meanwhile, his mother Pheretime, while Arcesilaus had worked evil for himself and was living at Barca, held the royal power of her son at Cyrene, both exercising his other rights and sitting in council. But when she heard that her son had been killed in Barca, she departed and fled to Egypt. She had services done for Cambyses, son of Cyrus, on her side by Arcesilaus, since this was the Arcesilaus who had given Cyrene over to Cambyses and had laid a tribute upon himself. Pheretime came to Egypt and sat as a suppliant before Arians, asking him to help her and alleging as a reason that her son had been killed because of his inclination toward the side of the Medes. This Arians had been appointed ruler of the province of Egypt by Cambyses. After the time of these events he lost his life because he tried to measure himself against Darius. Having heard and seen that Darius desired to leave behind as a memorial of himself something that had not been made by any other king, he imitated him until at last he received his reward. Darius refined gold and made it as pure as possible, and from this caused coins to be struck. Arians, as ruler of Egypt, did the same thing with silver, and even now the pure silver is called Ariandic. When Darius learned that Arians was doing this, he put him to death, bringing against him another charge, that of attempting rebellion. At the time I am speaking of, however, Arians had compassion on Pheretime and gave her all the troops in Egypt, both land and sea forces. He appointed Amasis, a Marathian, to command the land army, and Battus, of the race of the Pasargati, to command the fleet. But before he sent the army away, Arians dispatched a herald to Barca and asked who had killed Arcesilaus. The men of Barca all took responsibility for it, saying that they had formerly suffered many great evils at his hands. After hearing this, Arians at last sent away the army together with Pheretime. This charge was the pretext alleged, but in fact, as I believe, the army was being sent out for the purpose of subduing Libya. Among the Libyans there are many nations of many different kinds, and only a few of them are subject to the king, while the greater number paid no regard to Darius.
And there we will pause, with Arcesilaus dead in the streets of Barca, and his mother Pheretime fleeing to the Persian governor of Egypt to beg for vengeance she will most certainly get. Next time, in the last part of the book, part 24, Herodotus walks us the whole length of Libya, nation by nation and marvel by marvel, and then brings the Persian army to the walls of Barca for a siege, and an ending that you will not soon forget. Mind the footnotes, and beware the folly.